Hello, and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson. And a very warm welcome to this episode, Bridge Challenging Conversations. Now, this episode is the continuation of a mini series in the podcast where we are focusing in on the book, my book, Become a Global Leader, that has finally been released last week and is available for you to buy right now. This book is for those of you who are absolutely determined to make their leadership goals happen. Not later, but now, in the next 12 months, and want to take the very practical steps to enable that to happen from within, understanding how they can empower their confidence, how to master their clarity, to elevate influence, bridging challenging conversations, and connecting with cultural intelligence. The people that I have helped over the last 10 years are often experts already. They have experience, they have skills and qualifications that mean they are more than ready. What is lacking is their global leader communication. And that is why I have written this book. It was a dream over years, and it was a year's worth of writing, editing, and publishing. And I'm incredibly excited to share that book with you now. And I would love for you to get your own copy of the book. Not only does it share the best of my practical insights, experiences, and tools, but there's also an amazing resource book that you can access and download for free when you purchase your own copy. So, to get hold of your copy of the book, just head over to www.culturekappa.com/book and you can get your book there. And for those of you who've already got their copy, how are you finding it? Are you enjoying it and finding it valuable? If you have found it valuable so far, I would absolutely love it if you could leave me an Amazon review. Just head over to Amazon, leave me a review, let me know how you're finding it. This is great to know, but also really helpful for other readers of the book. So, coming back to today's episode, this series has been over the last few weeks talking about the key pillars within the book and helping you to understand the very important topics you need to be experienced in, to develop, to know about if you are to become a global leader. And we already have spoken about empowering your confidence. That was a few weeks ago. We, of course, have looked at mastering your clarity to elevate your influence. And today we're looking at bridging challenging conversations. And why? Well, in my experience in my business in the last 10 years, and even before that, when I worked in marketing in international companies, challenging conversations come up all the time. It doesn't matter what level you're at, what your industry is, what team you're in, what department you're in, there are challenging conversations everywhere. Your skill as a current or future global leader is to know how to navigate those challenging conversations, to find solutions, not to be right all the time, but to find solutions together that will help you move forward, to stop you being stuck. And in my view, this matters particularly in a global context because often the people I'm working with are either leading teams across multiple locations that are very, very diverse, or they're working with those teams and they need to influence those teams. So when a challenging conversation comes up, it is really quite tricky. It's not just a simple case of going for a coffee, a drink, a water to talk about it and sort it out. You have to find other ways. And this is where this pillar, I think, is really important and significant when you are trying to up your leadership and to demonstrate that you are at that level. So let's really talk about challenging conversations. Let's talk about this as something we embrace, and also don't avoid that we really get stuck into them. Now, my approach that I use in my work is the challenging conversation bridge. And in the first chapter of this pillar, what I talk about, and it's really important, is you can't step onto the bridge before you've actually established the foundations. So, in this first chapter of the pillar, of this book I've written, I talk about the foundations that you need to lay down. So, share this idea of designing conversations, really being very thoughtful about how you're going to approach the conversation. I also go into some detail around the cultural angles and disagreements and share with you some of the key behavioral preferences that might influence the way that people enter into that disagreement, how they think about disagreements, and what is going to help you to resolve them. Finally, we explore this idea of turning up the empathy radar. I think this is a really critical point, particularly if we find ourselves in disagreements dividing into them and us. So, this is an idea, a concept I talk about with my clients about this idea of the empathy radar to help you. So, this is the first part of bridging challenging conversations, having your foundations in place. The second part, of course, is then walking across the bridge itself. And this is a detailed step by step process that I highly recommend that you go through in the book so that you can really understand it in detail. However, what I can share here, rather than all of the steps, I'll share with you some of the initial ones and some of the key concepts so you can get a flavor for it and understand what is needed. The first step, which is needed before anything else, is establishing an openness to discuss. This is quite important because what I often talk about is that if you're trying to enter into a conversation where there has been conflict or disagreement, you will meet resistance. And this idea of resistance means that you'll never find a way to meet. The other person doesn't even want to talk about it. So you have to understand about that openness to discuss where, if that person is ready to enter into the conversation. I also talk about on the bridge laddering up to the common goal. I feel this is quite important. Sometimes what's going on within disagreements is that we have two or more separate goals and agendas going on. It's quite difficult to get to an agreement if you have different approaches, different objectives that you're trying to achieve. So I really strongly believe that you need to find some way of aligning. And this is where this concept of laddering up to the common goal is really important. Now, there are many other steps as well, of course, but one of the final steps on this approach, not the absolute final, but towards the end, is what I call the innovation mindset. This idea, this mindset is really about helping you to find the solutions. And I go into detail in the book around how to develop this innovation mindset and what it involves to really create new solutions. So, this is all about resolving conflict with the challenging conversation bridge. From there, in the next chapter and the next topic that I think is important to you if you want to become a global leader is listening. And I've called this chapter Listening 101 for Better Communication. Because although I find most people agree with me that listening is important, most people miss the point that listening isn't just a passive skill. It is absolutely about becoming a better communicator. And that is critical if your aspiration is to become or to step up further as a global leader. So, what does listening 101 look like? Well, some themes that we touch on in this chapter include this idea of intelligent listening, and I describe to you in detail what that means and how you can approach it. I also talk about very usefully, and I know this for myself, how important this is, strategies for when you're distracted, how to get your listening back on track. There's also a section of this chapter which is dedicated to getting other people's attention when they're not listening to you. This is a question that I sometimes get asked about as well. So that's why I felt it was an important part, an important point, in fact, to include in the book. The final topic area within bridging challenging conversations and the final chapter in this pillar in my book is about communicating your boundaries. I really wanted to include this chapter because I feel this is a topic that every leader everywhere faces. And I know it for myself. It's something that's come up for me again recently, personally and professionally. So, knowing how to establish those boundaries is a really, really important part. And it can be part of the challenging conversations you need to have. So, within this chapter, I share why it's so hard for us to say no. I also talk about the strategies for setting your boundaries and knowing when to really fix them and when to be more flexible. And then finally, we look at ways of how to say no, how to say assertively, but not aggressively. And again, I know this is a question I get asked quite regularly. People worry about offending other people, about saying no to other people in certain contexts. And again, this can be culturally driven. So there we have it, the 4 areas that you need to know as a global leader to bridge challenging conversations. They form the 4 chapters within this pillar within my book, Become a Global Leader. And I would absolutely love for you to purchase your own copy of this book. It's live now. It's called Become a Global Leader. You can you can get it, sorry, you can purchase it from www.culturecuppa.com/book. And when you download the book, if you have an e-version or when you have your own paperback version, you'll also be able to access the free complimentary resource book that accompanies reading my book as well, which has even more templates and bonus exercises and questions for you. So, highly recommend that you do that as well. And if you have read it already and or you've read parts of it already and you would love to leave me a review, I would really deeply appreciate that. It means a lot to me personally, and it also means that other readers know what people are finding valuable. So if you'd like to do that, just head over to Amazon, leave me a review over there. I would love that, and it'd be good to get your feedback as well. So, coming back to today's topic, we talked about bridging challenging conversations. And as ever, I have a number of reflection questions for you, which I'd love to share with you now. So, the first one is we talked about empathy radar today when we started to talk about the foundations for the challenging conversation bridge. And so I would love to ask you, how can you bring in more empathy to your situations? Which situations needs more empathy right now from you? And the final question is, where do you currently need to say no more? Where do you need to assert your boundaries? I would love to know the answers to these questions. And I also really love continuing the conversation once a podcast episode has finished. So please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My personal profile over there is Victoria Reynoldson, and you can let me know the answers to those questions or something else that has caught your attention from today's podcast episode. Let me know what you think and let's continue that conversation. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you joining me for the show, joining me for this episode. Really hope that you enjoyed the book when you get hold of your own copy, find it valuable and very practical for you as you go on your own journey to become a global leader. Thank you so much and see you next time.